So autumn is definitely one of my favourite times of year. I do like sort of the early springtime, but autumn's when I love to be out on the bank, you know. Everything's changing. The fish are generally at the biggest natural weights, you know. Very little spawn or anything left in them. So I like to be on the bank hunting some of these fish, but it can be a very difficult time of year. They've been battered all summer. They've been hammered all the way through spring, and they tend to be a lot more wary this time of year. But you know, the rewards are there to be had, but it does get very tricky. And this time of year I've always found, especially into sort of your mid-autumn time, the fish will naturally head to those depleting sort of areas of natural food. So, you know, the creatures of habit and the body clock will be telling them now that those areas of natural food will start to deplete really quickly. And it's those types of areas that I will start to concentrate on. Generally in spring and summer, you'll often come across like bloodworm beds and things like that. Note those down, you know, really take note of where those are during the spring and summer months. Spring gets, you know, you get a bit easier in spring because they'll be on bait and things like that. But if you're finding these natural food sources, keep a note of where they are, because it is absolutely crucial come autumn. So you're looking for stuff like silt gullies, things like that, full of bloodworm, you know, mussel beds, areas where there's good amounts of weed, vast snail growths. And as everything starts to die off and deplete and it's floating up and down and whatnot, these fish do start rooting around in these areas. And quite often they can avoid your baits. You know, they've been battered on bait all year, and then all of a sudden the body's telling them to go and seek out these natural food sources. So that's the first thing they'll head to, and they'll deplete those stocks before often moving back onto angler's baits. So if you find these, you stand yourself in a better chance to basically, you know, to work with them. And if you can't find sort of the silt areas, or the silt areas have been done to death, quite often you'll find them in the last bit of living weed. I'm not talking about the dying stuff, you know, the stuff that's all black and stuff. There's always a little bit of greener weed out there and stuff, and these start to get smaller and smaller, and you'll often find the carp tearing these areas up. And they'll be on, you know, they'll be on the last bit of caddis that's hatching, and they'll be on the bits of snails and stuff that's in there. And if you can locate these areas and fish to them effectively, you can often put that bonus fish on the bank. So I tend to go out in autumn looking for silt areas, but if I have to fish in weed, I'll start looking at things like chod rigs, you know. A single placed in an area of natural food will often pick more up than trying to fish off that area into a clearer spot with bait. And you'll get frustrated seeing the fish knocking about in these weed beds thinking they're going to pull off. They're probably not at this time of year, you know. And then they might have a little bit of a spat and come out and have a feed on the spot. But generally, fish to where you see them fish are actively feeding on naturals, and that'll stand you in the best chance. And for me, I stay away from sort of florals this time of year, other than my trusty milky malts, which is a white, which, you know, when it comes to florals, you know, they don't stand out in your face as much. They're quite subtle. So, but I'll go for like a bug pop-up or an SLK pop-up. And again, what I tried to do is I tried to push a lot of liquid food into these while they're still popping. You know, you can just get enough in there and maintain that pop-up effect that you need. Stuff like your liquid liver and, you know, the Calanus hydro and things like that, I'll just start to put in there, and I'll leave it coated round. You know, you'll see some of my hook baits, you know, they're coated in a bit of liquid, and I just keep adding a little bit just so they're buoyant enough. You place one of them over the top of the weed on the chod rigs when those fish are feeding in there, and you are likely to have a bite. So yeah, Ed, and note down where those bloodworm beds are, the natural feeding areas and things like that, because at this time of year they can be an absolute godsend and a blank saver for many times. So yeah.